Good morning. Welcome to this morning's negotiation nugget, which is all about what to leverage when you are negotiating with long-term suppliers and customers. This nugget will be approximately 10 minutes, and I intend to take you through 5 key areas to consider when you are negotiating with partners, with suppliers, with customers that you have long-term relationships with. Often those negotiations I find are the hardest because you've got to transition from playing the role of relationship management, working in collaboration through the execution of any existing deal or partnership or term of agreement that you have in place. And then when it comes to deal renewal time or the opportunity to evaluate the current deal, the stance changes to not just the execution in day-to-day, but negotiating for maximum value. And often what I find is the transition from day-to-day management and relationship connection and transitioning into negotiation mode can be difficult for people. And knowing how to operate as you are transitioning becomes critical in order to maximize value for both parties. So I'm just going to share on my screen a slide that takes you through the 5 key areas that I'm going to talk through. Now, on the surface, they may seem obvious, but I'll dive down a little bit deeper into what does it mean and why have I picked these 5 key areas to focus on specifically when you are focusing on long-term relationships. Now, when you're thinking about long-term partnerships, if you are working with a supplier or a customer over many months, many years, where it is important not only to get value from that transaction and that relationship, but it's very much about partnership and relationship being the emphasis. It's not a one-time deal. You're going to need each other. There's a level of interdependency. With that relationship, there is a requirement for deep trust. Now, I know that's obvious for the most part, but not always when you're thinking about going into a negotiation environment does the trust that's been garnered and established through that time that you've been working together outside of the deal negotiation itself, is that really considered? Now, when we want to talk about trust, I want to just talk to the trust formula. Now, some of you may be familiar with the trust formula, others less so. So the trust formula is made up of trust assets, which are essentially about being reliability, being credible, credibility, and a level of intimacy. And that's requiring you to be open in your sharing and creating a sense of vulnerability so that both parties are giving some information in order to strengthen that relationship that makes them vulnerable to the other party. But in the absence of that vulnerability, trust would not exist. Those 3 areas all create your trust asset. What actually destroys the trust is the level of self-orientation that's brought to the relationship. So when you're thinking about long-term partnerships and leveraging long-term deals, when you're thinking about trust, I want you to think about to what extent have you maximized the trust asset, the reliability between both parties in the operation, in the connection, in the communication, the credibility of delivering on your promises, the commitments that you make to each other, and the level of intimacy that's created in the relationship so that it's that shared vulnerability, making yourselves to some degree vulnerable with each other with an appropriate level of risk associated with that assessment made. But recognizing that when you have a strong trust asset and minimize the self-orientation, actually you deepen the connection to give more time, energy, and what's the word I'm looking for? An opportunity in the negotiation to have give each other grace when things get challenging. Because as negotiations do, they do get challenging and you do need to give each other grace. But without that trust, it's very, very difficult to access that level of grace. So recognizing that self-orientation, meaning focus on just on your needs and not on the connective needs of both parties, needs to be minimized. In order to do that, what you can then focus on is the alignment. Most teams, if you're in business to business negotiations, it's not just one person negotiating with another person. There's teams of people involved through the negotiation, whether that's at the table or outside of the room, in terms of decision-making hierarchies, people that sign off on the deals, those that are authorized to say yes, and interested parties on both sides. Now, one of the key things to be successful with a long-term supplier and customer is, in the first instance, get alignment internally to what the objective of the negotiation is. And you'd be surprised to see the differing perspectives that individuals in your negotiation team will have. So get really clear internally around what that objective is. Get people to write it down, get people to share it in a team, and then start to assess where there's differences internally. So you have to align internally with a common objective first, because this will facilitate sign off and decision making when the deal gets to that crucial end for closing. And then what I want you to do is focus on alignment with the other party around the common objective. So the chosen party is a long-term customer or supplier for a reason. So what is that shared common objective that both parties have? Now, this serves two things. Not just so that you have a common objective that you're both working to negotiate a deal around, but also what it helps you do is when negotiations get tricky and they get tough and you might get entrenched in the detail, and that detail focus can lead to deadlock. What having an alignment of a common objective allows for is, when deals are getting sticky in the detail, it allows you to zoom out and focus on where you are last aligned. So when there's those sticky points where you're not agreeing or where there's conflict, zoom back out, chunk it all the way up to the main overarching objective that you last both aligned on. And with that, you can then go down into the detail to ensure that that perspective is retained as you go through the negotiation. The third point I want to talk to is mindset. Now, there are a number of things that you can do with value when it comes to negotiation. You can take it, you can give it, you can share it, you can create it, you can protect it, and you can destroy it. Now, in order to focus on a long-term supplier and customer relationship, you really need to be clear as to what approach you're taking when it comes to the value. Are you taking it or giving it, sharing it, creating it, protecting it, or destroying it? Knowing where your mindset is on that will allow you then to determine how you're showing up. In order to have a successful partnership, it really needs to be a mindset of winning together. And that then involves creating value, looking for opportunities to create solutions together that may not be obvious on the surface. If you take a mindset of, I'm going to get what I want from this relationship, and my focus is, again, an avoidance of trust is that self-orientation. If I'm focusing on the self-orientation, I lose the opportunity to really create a win together mindset, and that vulnerability of openness and sharing, again, is lost because we're not taking a mindset of how do we solve for problems that both parties have got. How do we create shared solutions that allow us to win together? And if you care enough about each other's success and each other's profitability, then the creativity and the holistic relationship strengthens, because there's that shared interdependency and connection that each of you are striving to strengthen and encourage to thrive. When we move on to the fourth one around listening, what I want to talk about listening here is listening, as we will have heard in various instances. It's not listening to respond, but here I really want you to have the intent to understand. You have a significant amount of information about your other party that you're negotiating with already. And that information isn't something that you just get at the negotiating table when you're ready to strike a deal. You have years worth of knowledge through day-to-day interactions. You hear the daily problems that your counterparty has, the solutions that they most value. You understand the dynamics of what's important to them through that. What I want you to bring to that table when you're negotiating is not just the listening you bring in the room in that moment across from each other when you're trying to thrash out a deal. It's all of the listening that you have demonstrated your understanding through prior to the negotiation, prior to getting in that room, that shows that the solution, the proposal that you've already created has demonstrated your understanding of what's important to the other party. What you are privy to through long-term relationships is the opportunity to really connect the dots with what's important to individuals. In a negotiation environment, people have game faces on. It's game plan time. It's how do we execute, and we're managing a lot more our instructions, our communication, the way we deliver proposals, the way we are acting in our body language, which is all very managed in a negotiation environment. However, what is often not managed is the way we show up on a day-to-day basis when we don't think we're in a negotiation. And those are the moments where your listening has to be the strongest, where you're making all of the information that you're getting during that time means something, because it demonstrates not an opportunity to use it as a way to manipulate the other party for adverse results for them, but with a win together mindset, bringing that collaborative approach to say, actually, several months ago, I've been hearing this, and this, and you've shared insights that's really allowed us to go deep in that understanding around what's important to you. With that in mind, the proposal we have addresses those things, whilst also recognizing what's important to us, and let us share that with you. And that listening creates a very different relationship and outcome when it comes to the negotiation. So what I would encourage when it comes to the listening, don't just give your listening in the room. Make notes, review your notes through the course of the interaction in day to day. That gives you information that tells you here's what we can do and how we can do it. That allows us to use that listening to the fullest effect in the room. The final one, just to wrap up, is around perspective. If you're negotiating with a long-term supplier or customer, you have to have a long-term perspective. Too often I see teams come together and thrashing out deals, and the focus is said to be a strategic long-term partnership, but the way the approach is taken in the room, it's all about short-term, what can we get now, rather than what might we need to invest in to get the best result and the best outcome in the future. Taking a more long-term strategic approach allows you to focus on solutions that are sustainable for the long term, that create value. Think about the Japanese principle of Kaizen, continuous improvement, and principles such that, for example, the likes of Toyota and Honda have introduced over time, which is all about a collaborative, deep relationship with your suppliers, where they developed supplier development programs that strengthen the supplier's capability, allows them to create more efficiency, reduce costs, and ultimately allows the entire supply chain to improve. So not only does the business like Toyota and Honda succeed, but the supplier base that they use also thrives. And that interaction, that deepening of relationship, that collaboration creates value far more than could be created in an initial deal, which gets you value now but may not give you the result long term that strengthens your supply chain in times of interruption, as COVID's demonstrated the fragility of many supply chains over that time. But those relationships and the willingness to help each other succeed and to thrive together by looking for areas to create value, investing heavily in the relationship and the trust and the alignment of objectives so that you're all moving in the same direction, ultimately is what creates value. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been useful. If there is any topic that you want me to address in future negotiation nuggets, please do not hesitate to reach out, drop me a line directly, let me know, and I'd be happy to address. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you again for the next negotiation nugget. Thank you.